Hi everyone, it's Rich, and in this video I'm going to talk about death. More specifically, I will talk about what happens after you die, or rather I will talk about what I believe happens after we die, because ultimately nobody really knows. Is death the end of your life, or is there an afterlife? Is there life after death? My pretty straightforward answer to this question is that there is most likely no life after death. There is no afterlife. Death is the end of your life. And that's it. And to me, this strikes me as quite a trivial statement. Because after all, isn't that the definition of death? That it's the end of your life? If that is the definition of death, then it is a pretty trivial statement. But for some reason, or for many reasons, it is not regarded as a trivial question. There are many theories out there on what happens to us when we die. Does the soul live on, even after our body has decayed? I don't think so. I don't think so. And in this video, I will explain why I don't believe that there is an afterlife, why I believe that death is, in fact, the end of our lives. And to understand death, we first need to understand life, what life is, where we come from, and what we are, essentially. And from my perspective, we are organisms. We are pretty complex organisms. We have developed these brains that host our consciousness. And the thing about our brains is that they're fairly complex, and we don't really understand how they work or where this consciousness and perception really comes from. And that's why death, it's so mysterious, right? But we know a few things about our brain. And that is that it can be manipulated. It can be, it's malleable. If I fall and hit my head really hard, I may lose certain abilities. I may lose my sight, for example. My personality may be different as a result of the fall and the damage to my head. If someone beats my head in with a baseball bat, I will most likely never be the same. My perception of the world will drastically change forever. Now, if you keep beating my head in with that baseball bat, what do you think will happen? Am I going to magically reappear someplace with all of my previous abilities intact, with my personality, with my sight back? And if so, what is it that hosts this sight? Am I going to have a body, or how will I perceive the world after I have died, after my body has, disappeared? If we look at the brain as a computer, I think that analogy works pretty well. If you break a computer, the software stops working. It loses its functionality. So if consciousness, if life, perception, is the software, and the brain is the hardware that hosts this software, then naturally, if you break the hardware, the software will stop functioning. If you drop a computer from the 10th story, then you will probably, it will break. It will be torn into pieces. And it will not work anymore. It won't go to heaven. It won't go to the software sky. It will simply cease to function. It will cease to exist. And this is precisely what I believe happens when we die. Our body stops our body stops functioning, and as a result, our consciousness simply disappears. It vanishes. Quite meaningless, huh? Well, if you think about it, the reason we have developed this consciousness to begin with is because it is beneficial for our survival and replication. And our consciousness is a pretty powerful tool at that. I mean, just look at how effectively we reproduce and how long we have been around. It's pretty insane, actually. And that is, we have our consciousness and our ego and our complex brains to thank for that. You see, there are like 200,000 people die every day. These lives, they simply go out of existence. We are animals. What do you believe happens to an animal when it dies? Does it go to an animal kingdom somewhere? Now, sure, I mean, I try to be humble. I don't know what happens, but I believe, based on my experience in life, that my ego and my consciousness is actually limited to my physical body. I think it is fundamentally attached to my brain. And once my brain stops functioning, even if there is some kind of higher life force out there that I will just join and be a part of, the ego that I call I will not exist anymore. Because that ego is simply a result of social adaptation. Yeah. That's my high-level take on death and what I believe happens after we die. We cease to exist. What will that be like? Well, it won't be like anything. Do you remember the time before you were born? No. I think it will be pretty much like that. Anyway, until next time, always be thinking.